A visitor in the night. She smiled today for maybe the first time in a long time, realizing that it is true when they say every generation has its story, a story whose job is to unfold from one generation to another, ensuring we are good descendants while living and honoring our ancestors, no matter what direction our lives take. Because of these thoughts, Georgina's smile was more significant and broader than ever, not because of the satisfying aroma of her fresh morning coffee, lifting her thoughts, but because for the first time in a long time, she had risen from a comfortable night's sleep. As Georgina traced her finger around her morning coffee cup, still too hot to consume, her mind began to wander and explore how it came to be that she was sat alone in the student kitchen, smiling. Her memory poured back to the time she found herself precariously perched on a mountain suitcases, arms outstretched, steadying herself from what could be an inevitable and terrible fall. But it was the only way that she could simultaneously sit and watch all her material possessions. Sat high and exposed, Georgina found that she was, figuratively and metaphorically, torn into pieces. Part of her heart was with her mother, father, brothers and sisters, who she left behind in Freetown, Sierra Leone. Another part of her was with her mind, giddy with the excitement at the prospect of a new frontier and adventure. But her body? Well, her body manifested her uncertainty with her stomach tied in knots, churning the what-ifs, processing the current and present danger, balancing your whole world on a mountaintop of suitcases. If Africans could do quiet and serene, no one had told this crammed congregation on the returning Gambian ferry. Too many people, vehicles, dust, and animals, Georgina thought, as she wide-eyed surveyed the sea of familiar and yet unfamiliar aunties, uncles, cousins, nieces, and nephews' faces. Faces carrying with them their histories and memories, while entrusting the captain and his crew with the safe passage of their hopes and dreams to their destination. A destination that required thoughts to compete and be elevated just to be heard. Giving up on the idea, Georgina settled for her favourite pastime: observing, watching, and wondering. She began wondering about how, in this moment, the miracles that needed to happen for the paths of each life crammed on this tiny vessel to cross. Moments into her daydream, a hand touched Georgina's knee, and a little face, beaming with big brown eyes and sunshine, looked up at her, offering her a fresh mango from a basket that was taller than the body of her brown eyes. "Want mango?" a little face said. "No, thanks," replied Georgina, thinking it had been almost 4 hours since breakfast. And now on the 6 a.m. ferry, despite her stomach knots, she was beginning to feel the rumblings of hunger. Still, by her reckoning, she had another 2 hours before she would reach her destination. So Georgina took off her handbag, draped around her shoulder, and made it into a pillow to rest on top of her cases, while she looked into the warm waters. It was not long before the parallels between her school history class and a vision of sunken faces looking back up at her in the water surfaced. With the vision, she could hear her mother's voice echo back at her. If you don't know where you are going, always remember where you are from. And child, remember, If you hold onto a memory tight enough, there is nothing and no one that can ever take that away from you. With her mother's words, tears swelled, almost in synchronicity of the rocking ferry. Georgina gave more thought to the parallels of her journey. She thought about how soon she will be on a boat crossing the Atlantic Ocean, just as her ancestors did. But this time, a few hundred years apart and under her own free will. Georgina had no choice but to cry herself to sleep silently. It was not long before she was dreaming. First, it was mangoes nestled amongst the biggest platter of fresh fruit with coconut, guava, banana, and pineapple, all laid out on her mother's kitchen table, all fresh purchases from the morning market. But then her dream turned into her recently deceased grandmother, who was now with her on the ferry, holding her hand, stroking her hair, just like she did when Georgina was a little girl. Georgina's grandmother appearing in her dreams was not unusual. She did this from time to time. Whenever Georgina needed comfort and reassurance, everything would be okay. Miss, wake up. We soon arrive at Banjul, an earnest voice said. Woken from her dream, Georgina began to make sense of the environment around her. She could see a steady wave of people and animals forming, jostling for position towards the ferry doors. Gathering her belongings, Georgina readied herself for a new adventure as the doors began to lower. Now in a land that had chewed and spewed out her colour, Georgina found herself at odds with the strange customs and traditions such as fish and chips and newspaper, Morris dancers, and people dancing around the maypole. To Georgina, this was 10 times more peculiar than her own traditions, for which this land had made little, if any, allowance. At first, Georgina thought her lack of sleep could be explained by her gradual absorption into moving to a cold and unforgiving land, a land that seemed to intent to mirror the cold, faceless expressions, always devoid of a smile and a warm reception. Perhaps it was her busy student nurse schedule, the relentless pressure, and the constant reminder that her stay and passing of her exams were essential to maintaining her visa status. Maybe her lack of sleep could be attributed to none of the above, but better explained by events that started 1 week ago, where Georgina woke to the faint sound dragging, like furniture, moving across the floor above. Only sound became progressively louder, followed by what sounded like shackles and thud, thud, thud. If there was a room above Georgina, the sound could easily have been explained as an inconsiderate neighbour. But at 2 o'clock in the morning, and with no room above, this was clearly something else. Georgina knew this constant haunting was not the product of her nightmares. She was always fully awake and could never get back to sleep, because the sound of chains and the 3 thuds preceded cold, damp, musty air that she could taste, smell, and feel. So one night, full of exhaustion and near breaking point, Georgina decided she would confront the visitor. She decided that she would find out what was wanted by asking, so she could put to rest her unrest. Sitting on the edge of her bed, with her flashlight, Georgina waited. And sure enough, at 2 a.m., the dragging sound and the thuds arrived. As the sound materialized, Georgina noticed a shadowy figure appear in the room's opposite corner. She blinked. She wiped her eyes and watched the figure make its way across her room towards her bed. Georgina flashed her flashlight in the entity's direction to try and make out who it was. But there was no face, no definition, just a solid black shape, moving like it was dragging its feet, murmuring like it was trying to say something. With this, Georgina reconsidered her intention, grabbed her keys, and ran out of her room into the hallway. She thought she would be comfortable with the visitor, and it would be like a visit from her grandmother. Seeing spirits and apparitions was nothing new. This encounter was unnerving. It was different. Georgina did not recognize the shadowy figure as a relative, and she could not make out what was trying to be said. For the rest of the night, Georgina stayed with a friend in the hospital accommodation and waited until the morning to telephone her mother to explain the night's events. Her mother listened with no interruptions before asking Georgina, "Since you came inland, what do you do to thank and remember your ancestors?" Georgina paused before opening her empty mouth. She could feel a ball of shame and anguish rising up from her stomach into her throat and taking her voice. She had been so busy trying to fit in, making new friends and juggling her schedule, she had forgotten her mother's advice. The words, "Pikin, remember who you are," echoed around Georgina's head as she struggled to answer. Knowing her question was rhetorical, Georgina's mum filled the silence with her repeated advice. "Georgina, to appease your ancestors, first buy a small bottle of alcohol and pour libation before anyone drinks. It is important to do this at a threshold and say a few words to give thanks and honor those who have come before me. Next, Georgina," her mum continued, "you must cook black-eyed beans, fried plantain, crispy golden akra, and rice bread. This needs to be laid out on a plate on a table with a glass of water overnight. No one must touch the food and water. In the morning, whatever is left must be buried with a few drops of alcohol and water, and you must say your words of appreciation and gratitude. Do this, Georgina, and you will satisfy your relatives. They will look after you and protect you from whatever entity has come your way." Through snivels and tears, Georgina thanked her mum, ensuring she had written every instruction before setting about her day shopping for her ingredients. Sure enough, as her mum said, the spirit or entity did not come back. Georgina thought she might hear from her grandmother, but something inside her told her she didn't need to. She knew her grandmother was watching over